But when you look at the actual numbers here, Israel has violated it hundreds of times since that period, multiple times a day, killed at least 400 Palestinians during that period. And this will go down as one of the worst crimes in the history of humanity that our government, the Biden administration, and the Trump administration are complicit in.
So
we have no leg
does it
to
go
stand
down?
on.
We have to debate this.
Yeah,
we don't have time.
We actually don't.
Oh, we don't have time for the anti-Israel propaganda.
We don't have
We have time for the anti-Israel propaganda.
We don't have time to debate it, unfortunately.
Could you say Hamas was wrong at any point during this conversation?
In today's video, Abby Phillip and Emma Vigeland go off on Scott Jennings on Newsnight, with Abby Phillip as a heated CNN debate breaks out over Donald Trump's foreign policy and global leadership. As Scott Jennings defends Trump's approach, Abby Phillip and Emma Vigeland push back with hard facts on Russia, Ukraine, and the risks of trusting authoritarian regimes. So let's dive in and watch how Abby Phillip and Emma Vigeland shut down Scott Jennings on Newsnight with Abby Phillip.
In the last 2 days, Trump has hosted both Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at Mar-a-Lago. And he's had a high-stakes phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. It appears to be a last-ditch effort to shore up some foreign policy wins for 2025. But is it working? Well, it's been nearly 4 years since the start of that war between Russia and Ukraine, and it appears that Trump is continuing to take Putin at his word over Zelensky. Here's just the latest example. Putin's claim that Ukraine struck one of his homes.
It's another thing to attack his house. It's not the right time to do any of that, and can't do it. And I learned about it from President Putin today. I was very angry about it.
Ukraine calls that allegation a complete fabrication. But with Zelensky to the president's right, Trump claimed that Russia actually wants Ukraine to succeed. Now, you can tell from Zelensky's face exactly how he felt about that comment. Watch.
They're going to be helping. Russia's going to be helping. Russia wants to see Ukraine succeed. Once, it sounds a little strange, but I was explaining to the president, President Putin was very generous in his feeling toward Ukraine succeeding, including supplying energy, electricity, and other things at very low prices.
I guess the question I have coming out of this is, what's the strategy? Is there any strategy at all here? Or is Trump just getting on the phone with Putin, listening to what he says, and then regurgitating everything that Putin says to him?
It feels like this is held together with Scotch tape and Elmer's glue at this point, because the most important person that you need at that table, Putin, didn't even show up. He did call and sort of set the groundwork before that meeting took place, but Putin has showed us over and over again where he stands. There's never been a ceasefire. After the meeting at the Vatican, after Alaska, after this week, he has shown us repeatedly that bombing is mightier than the pen. You can't have peace talks without a key player involved in this. And it doesn't matter what you have on paper. It doesn't hold on the ground if you don't have security guarantees, if you don't talk about the harsh issues, the difficult topics of territory, which President Trump has said are still sticky and they haven't come to be resolved at this point.
So, Scott, why is Trump so seemingly naive about this? And also, why is he giving Putin so much credibility on the world stage that he wants what's best for Ukraine? Here's how Jim Garrity put it. This is like saying that Trump wanted to help Kamala Harris succeed in their last presidential election, or that the Death Star wanted Alderaan to succeed. For there to be peace, all Putin would have to do is issue the order, stop bombing, stop shooting, and peace would occur.
Yeah, I think the president is constantly talking to both of these guys and trying to find a way to get them to both get into a place where they don't have to go back home and say, we lost. I mean, that's the reality here. This only ends with a negotiated settlement. Both people have to go home and say, we won, or we got something out of this, or this didn't totally end on terms that are opposed to us. It's very tricky, and obviously it's, a solution has evaded him for the last year. I don't have really any faith in Vladimir Putin. They've never engaged in any kind of ceasefire. He's never shown any interest really in ceasing hostilities for any period of time, and they've bombed Ukraine at times, when it felt like something was happening, and then Russia moves in and
just this
rattles
weekend, 500,000
Ukraine.
people
So
without power in Ukraine, like 2 days before your meeting with.
But
that's not exactly a sign that you're interested in peace.
What stands out is how much evidence exists outside the talking points that undercut Scott Jennings' defense. Russia's behavior over the last 4 years is documented in satellite imagery, UN investigations, and independent reporting showing repeated strikes on civilian infrastructure, even during supposed diplomatic windows. That matters because peace talks aren't theoretical exercises. They're judged by what happens on the ground. When bombs keep falling, credibility disappears. There's also a basic imbalance in whose word deserves trust. Ukraine has opened itself to international monitors, allowed war crimes investigations, and consistently aligned its claims with what NATO intelligence later confirms. Russia, by contrast, has a long record of staged incidents and fabricated justifications, from Crimea to Bucha. Treating those narratives as equally valid isn't neutrality, it's distortion. Another overlooked point is leverage. Historically, negotiations only move when aggressors face sustained costs. The Minsk agreements failed not because diplomacy is useless, but because enforcement mechanisms were weak and Russia faced limited consequences. That's why European allies keep stressing security guarantees and continued pressure, not vague optimism. Trump's approach also risks signaling weakness beyond Ukraine. Analysts have warned that rewarding territorial aggression sets precedents that authoritarian governments elsewhere are watching closely. If borders can be changed through force and spin, international law loses meaning. Trying is not the same as leading. Real leadership is skeptical, evidence-driven, and anchored in accountability. Abby Phillip and Rina Ninan are right to question a strategy that relies on trust without verification. That distinction matters.
But I credit the president for trying. It may be the most difficult foreign policy issue he has to deal with. I think ultimately it will be dealt with, but it's not going to be dealt with. I mean, Putin's never going to go to Moscow and wave a white flag, and you don't want Zelensky to have to do that either, because obviously they're the aggrieved party here. So it's like trying to, put a camel through the eye of a needle.
It's definitely not being solved on day one.
Yeah, there's another big problem that's looming off the Eurasian continent, which is Taiwan, right? And so as we are dealing with this, the Chinese leadership is sitting in the capital, watching how we're behaving with one of our supposed allies, Ukraine. And if we reward territorial benefit Vladimir Putin's aggression, you will see a signal to the Chinese leadership that they can go into Taiwan and they are not going to necessarily be guaranteed that the United States is going to push them back. That is a major strategic problem for us. The way we are reorienting ourselves away from our commitments in the Pacific and in Europe and toward this sort of Monroe Doctrine, Western Hemisphere strongman stance you were talking about earlier is a problem for us on the global scene.
Well, our national security strategy,
I would say it's not a problem in the context of, as Zelensky said today, Russia will win without the United States' involvement on Ukraine's side. And so the power dynamics are completely different. And I think that's why you see the president trying to bring Putin to the table and provide him some out to say that he won this. I don't think President Trump cares about what anyone, including myself at this table, says about the strategy that he believes is the right one. This whole idea of moral ambiguity in dealing with Putin, I totally get that. But we can also acknowledge that what we've been doing and what we previously did clearly didn't.
But what's the evidence that this is working? I mean, Trump had a whole party for Putin in Alaska. He literally rolled out a red carpet for him, went out in a press conference, said nice things about him, and then nothing?
I don't know what's happening behind the scenes, but I am saying that we've done things the more traditional way and just going out there and calling Putin an evil war criminal, who, of course, he is, but does not want to sit at the table and actually negotiate.
Here's the thing. I don't see any evidence. You can say that the previous thing didn't work. The current thing is also not working.
Not yet.
And the only thing that it's doing is emboldening Putin.
It's not.
I don't understand. What is the evidence that it's working?
It's not working until it does. I mean, that's the thing. You keep talking and you keep trying to get these guys.
Well, you could say that about the last effort.
It's not
because I think
the
other thing is that the very same people who for the last 4 years have basically been saying we need to just give up. We need the United States wave the white flag and let Ukraine fall if it's going to fall. What they don't acknowledge is that the only reason that we're at a point where Putin even has to talk to some extent is because Ukraine has kept up the military pressure. The military pressure.
And how have they done that?
Has been
with our help.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
I mean,
your MAGA friends were opposed to that, Scott.
One thing Abby Phillip is tapping into, even without spelling it out, is how much the historical record undermines the optimism coming from Scott Jennings and Jason Rantz. Russia hasn't just failed to honor ceasefires. Independent groups like the UN and OSCE have documented hundreds of violations during supposed negotiation windows. That pattern matters because diplomacy only works when violations carry consequences. There's also a strategic reality they're glossing over. Ukraine didn't force Putin to talk through goodwill gestures. He came to the table only after sustained battlefield losses, sanctions pressure, and Western military aid shifted the balance. That's consistent with decades of conflict research showing aggressors negotiate seriously only when costs rise, not when they're offered symbolic off-ramps. The Taiwan point is especially hard to dodge. US intelligence assessments have repeatedly warned that Beijing studies Ukraine as a test case. If territorial conquest is rewarded or normalized, it lowers the deterrent threshold in the Pacific. That's not speculation. Chinese military journals openly analyze Western responses to Ukraine to gauge future risks. What's missing from the "at least he's trying" defense is evidence. Traditional diplomacy didn't fail because it was too tough. It stalled because enforcement was inconsistent. Meanwhile, energy infrastructure strikes days before talks aren't miscommunication. They're leveraged through terror. Acknowledging complexity doesn't require moral fog. You can recognize negotiations are hard while still grounding strategy in accountability, deterrence, and facts. Abby Phillip's skepticism isn't cynicism, it's informed realism shaped by history, data, and how authoritarian regimes actually behave.
They were opposed to the United States helping.
My friend is the president. He's not opposed to that.
Okay.
He's obviously kept.
He said he's pure MAGA, though.
He was. So was his vice president.
Are we or are we not supporting Ukraine militarily?
All of those people
of course we are.
were opposed to it.
And we got NATO to do more. And
that is the only reason that he has a chance of even sitting down with Putin.
When you talk to people who are like in the thick of this, I asked someone who's an expert on this, what will really move the needle at this point? Like, we're trying something different here. President Trump's trying to get this to go through. It's not working. And they said sanctions on Russia could really, really affect the economy. I just don't see President Trump going anywhere near that or that happening. But I just don't know of any other pressure point. I was here the weekend before the hostage release, and I said, President Trump is going to make this happen. I know he's going to make this happen. There was fear from Netanyahu and fear on Hamas's side. The balance of power is different here. Putin does not think that Trump will push him back on this. And I think that is the big selling point on this.
Yes, and I do think that the kind of elephant in the room here is the United States completely losing, and the Biden administration is immensely complicit in this as well. Moral standing throughout the world due to our complicity in the genocide in Gaza, which has made it very difficult for us to speak to Ukrainian sovereignty and having a bully like the Russian government invading their sovereign territory. We had a doctor on our show who spoke about how the death toll is in the hundreds of thousands at this point, because the numbers that are currently being reported are only the numbers of the death toll of people who have been counted in the hospital. There are hundreds of thousands of people presumed dead, suffocating to death, crushed to death under rubble because of United States bombs. And that's across this administration and Trump here, who did get this ceasefire that he touts all the time in October. But when you look at the actual numbers here, Israel has violated it hundreds of times since that period, multiple times a day, killed at least 400 Palestinians during that period. And this will go down as one of the worst crimes in the history of humanity that our government, the Biden administration, and the Trump administration are complicit in.
Does it go down? We have to debate this.
Yeah, we don't have time.
We don't have time for the anti-Israel propaganda.
We don't have
time for the anti-Israel propaganda.
We don't have time to debate it, unfortunately.
Could you say Hamas was wrong at any point during this conversation?
October 7th is fine.
Listen, we know that there's plenty of disagreement on that issue.
I never said that.
We let it on spool for 2 minutes, but sure. Well, I don't understand. Israel's our ally. Not a single word in your speech for the atrocities that were committed on October the 7th.
We should cut off arms tomorrow.
Not a single word for the idea that Israel has every right to defend itself. Not a single word for the fact that Hamas right now is killing people inside of Gaza, their own people. You
What do
seem
you
to lay
say
it
to-
all at the feet of Israel,
Israeli
a democratic
human rights
ally
group.
in your own
Excuse me.
country,
It
and you
is-
have no
excuse me.
negative
Excuse
word
me.
for the
Excuse me.
terrorists who raped
All right,
and
all right,
murdered
all right.
and kidnapped.
Excuse me.
Zero.
B'Tselem,
None.
Israeli human rights group, says
None.
they're
And
committing
you still
genocide.
don't.
Guys.
You still don't.
We gotta go. Rena Ninen, thank you very much for being here.
What Rena Ninen and Emma Vigeland are highlighting goes far beyond talking points. It's about the tangible consequences of US foreign policy in real time. Independent reports from organizations like the UN and Human Rights Watch show that civilian casualties in Gaza have been drastically underreported, with hundreds of thousands presumed dead or injured in rubble collapses, and thousands displaced without access to food, water, or medical care. These are not abstract numbers. They reflect a humanitarian crisis exacerbated by both US military aid and political complicity. When it comes to Ukraine, the same pattern emerges. Sustained military pressure and NATO support are what force Russia to engage at all. Without continued international assistance, Ukraine would have far less leverage at negotiation tables. Experts in geopolitics note that Trump's reliance on personal diplomacy with Putin ignores decades of evidence showing that autocrats respond to hard power, not pleasantries or goodwill gestures. On the Middle East, data also shows that ceasefires brokered by any administration are frequently violated, and repeated bombings during supposed peace periods undermine credibility and trust. Furthermore, US credibility globally is challenged when alliances are selectively defended, supporting one democratic ally while failing to adequately respond to atrocities committed against civilians elsewhere sends dangerous signals to authoritarian governments, including China, regarding Taiwan. Rena Ninen and Emma Vigeland's perspective is rooted in fact. Policy without accountability, transparency, and enforcement cannot achieve lasting peace. Highlighting the human cost, scrutinizing the selective application of US influence, and pushing for consistent moral leadership is not just fair commentary, it's essential for understanding global stability. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center, are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out Ground News in the description down below.